السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Wow, man. I think we energize ourselves at the beginning with our salam, man. And, like, take ourselves to another level. Subhanallah.
You're really
Anyway, Imad, how are
smiling.
you, man?
You're really smiling.
How are
Is
you?
baby not keeping you?
Yeah, the
Alhamdulillah, I'm
baby's
good.
keep baby's keeping. You got police in your background. Are police chasing you?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I live. It's probably the ambulance because I live next to a hospital, like literally a few
Oh,
meters
okay.
away.
Inshallah.
So
Is that where you're going to be
that's
a
what.
doctor?
Huh?
Is that where you're going to
Nah,
be a
probably
doctor?
not. Is that why or where?
Where?
Probably not training here, but maybe not. Go back to
Okay.
Manchester hopefully.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Or what we?
So what's everyone saying? What's everyone saying? Where's everyone? Where's Sahil?
Oh,
Where's our guys?
we've got Khan.
Oh,
Last time we had Mac D. Now we've got Khan D. I think the whole D family is joining our podcast. Alhamdulillah.
what is that? I'm just looking at the comments now. Why is he wearing a question mark? Whoever that is. It's
What?
religious attire according to some people, Mister.
Yeah.
So
What's
take
wrong
that
with
back.
wearing a thing? Nah, but
It's
whenever I used to teach Sahil, I used to wear religious attire as well. So he's used to. Oh, it's Aftabuddin from Bolton. He lives in Bolton, but he studied in Blackburn with us guys. MashaAllah. He's
ah,
very mashallah knowledgeable Sati. Anyway,
mashallah. So
um,
by the way, Sahil, just to answer your question, he's wearing an elegant thobe. So yes, that's
oh,
what I'm wearing. It should be. You know what? It's just. You know when someone wears like Islamic attire for so long, like an imam or something, and then you just see them in like a t-shirt or a football jersey or wearing something. Yeah, like it's just that feeling that people have sometimes. But for Sahil, it's the opposite because he's only seen me wearing like other things, and then he sees me
yeah,
wearing like Islamic attire, and then he's like, "Oh, what is he wearing?" Like obviously, I can't. That's what the intonation from the text can't really gauge. But yeah, that's what he's
yeah.
wearing. Alhamdulillah.
Shalom, man.
So yeah,
Alhamdulillah.
in
But then a lot of people take this very seriously. Like you might find people in like many churches and that who kind of tell you off if you don't cover your hair in the mosque.
yeah, and it's an issue. I think it's more cultural than and their cultural understanding of religion. And I think what we spoke about last week as well. Like there might be something which is acceptable in the Sharia or like in religion or fiqh or whatever. But because people have been hardwired to believe certain things, they can't unlearn it. So that's a practical example of knowing becoming the enemy of learning. And I think, but then is it really knowing when
I think
there's
it then becomes a
information
bit
that's
more,
false?
yeah, because I think then that information it develops a kind of a fitra within them, a disposition to it, as opposed to an intellectual based emotional response. So they kind of just don't like the look of somebody who's praying without a hat. Yeah, that's a very good question. Like, is it actually knowing?
And then your imam, who you pray behind, is not wearing a hat, and you're like, oh, when you lead the prayer, have you ever led the prayer without a hat?
Now, usually in the masjid, I've always worn a hat to lead the prayers.
Okay, why is that?
Um,
So your
I don't know,
uniform.
man. I guess so. I guess it would be an expected uniform of an imam in a masjid.
Yeah, I mean the hat is just rather kalamsua. Um,
Sorry?
the kalamsua, the hat. There's loads of discussion about it, and what standing does it have in clothing and even attire, like wearing a certain clothing. What's the status of clothing? I mean, when I was studying in Darul Uloom in the madrasa for years, it was just kind of it was the norm to wear this sort of attire, and it would be, I think, subconsciously you imagine this attire to be a religious attire, so it has religious connotations to it. But the reality of this attire being a sort of religious attire, I think that's something that might be questioned. And the Qalanswa as well, the hat, the topi. Um, of course, there are scholars who encourage wearing it, in certain, especially when you're praying. And even some like Hanafi scholars have said, if you don't wear the hat sometimes, there's a thing about not wearing the hat of humility and that being praiseworthy. But then I think that goes against like the norm of wearing a hat anyway. So they would mention that not wearing a hat out of humility or humbleness, that's a good thing. But if you don't do that, people assume then it's makruh that you're not wearing a hat. But the reason for the hat being in place is they say, if you were to, and this is a question that they ask as well. Like when we're praying in front of the kings of kings, the Shehin emperor of the universe.
Hmm.
But if we were to visit the queen, what attire would we wear?
So would you
So
cover your hair?
obviously, exactly, would you cover your hair
But then it
in this
depends if you went
situation?
as an imam, innit? If you went as a Muslim ambassador of the Muslims, like Amir al-Mu'mineen or something, or if you went just as a random guy. But if you went
Okay.
like as a Muslim, you'd
Yeah.
wear your Muslim attire, wouldn't you?
What's Muslim attire?
The one that makes you look like a Muslim.
Or any. Okay, so that must mean, and the definition of Sharia is anything that covers your aura, and that it has the rish in the Quran. According to the Quran,
Hmm.
Allah said to Adam that Allah sent down clothes for a couple of purposes. Allah says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim.
I had.
Ya bani Adam, قد أنزلنا عليكم لباسا يواري
Hmm.
سوآتكم وريشا."
I had.
Oh, child of Adam. This is mentioned in Surah Alif Lam Mim Sad, Suratul Araf. This is Suratul Araf, Alif Lam Mim Sad, Kitabun
I don't
Unzila.
know.
I think
But
so.
anyway, man.
So in this surah,
Um,
in this ayah, Allah says, "O child of Adam, certainly it is us who have sent down this clothing. قد أنزلنا عليكم لباسا يواري سوآتكم," so that you may cover, you may hide the bits of yourself which you do not want other people to see, i.e., the private parts. Warishan, and people always miss this out. What is rish? What is the translation
but
of rish?
how do you know it's just private parts?
Yuwari sawas. The sawah is the thing which, asa, like it comes from the same word, things which is bad, thing which is like hidden as well, something which you don't want other people to see, which is obviously referring to the private parts as a minimum. And this is what the scholars have commentated on, meaning that
No,
you
but what
have
if
to
it's
cover your
more than that?
aura by the
But what
clothing.
if it's more than that then? What if it includes
Yeah,
the
the more than
arms?
that is by the
What
seven
if it
parts of.
includes what if it includes your head?
So the more than
Wearing
that is the
kalansuwa.
second. The more than that is the ma'tuf of the ayah. Warishan. Now this is the discussion. What is rish? The
Oh, okay.
first purpose of clothing is to cover yourself. The second purpose of clothing is rish, and this is the discussion of rish. Rish, in my understanding, can mean fashionable. I don't know what translators have translated rish as, but rish, in my understanding, is like a feathery thing. Let me just quickly check this one. It's a translation of rish. Rish fil Quran.
To be honest, I completely agree with you. I don't know why I'm trying to take the other side. It's getting a bit
Yeah,
tiring,
because
to be honest.
yeah, you're forced to
But
agree
I
with me
really
for the
don't.
first time.
No, not agree with. I was kind of playing devil's advocate, but then I just got
Oh, so
bored
you still
because
not agree with me?
it's not very
Nah, nah.
fun. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I think so, man. We've definitely got that. We've definitely got that issue, and that's a very nice way of actually explaining clothing. How does Allah explain the clothing that He gave us? Like, what reasons does Allah give for having clothing? And the two reasons is just to cover your body and to be fashionable, according to Imad. Um,
yeah. So it is fashionable. I'm looking at one of the dictionaries. معنى وريشا في القرآن الكريم ريش الطائر معروف. So like I said, the feather is something which is known. It's well known. وقد يخص الجناح من بين سائره ولكون الريش للطائر كالثياب للإنسان استعير لثياب. قال تعالى وريشا ولباس التقوى. Warishan and then Walibasut. I forgot to mention the next part of the ayah. Astaghfirullah. I didn't mention the ayah in completeness. وَلِبَاسُ التَّقْوَى ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ ذَلِكَ مِنْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَذَكَّرُونَ. So Allah mentioned, and clothing is also of, so adorn, rish, I translate it as fashionable. And here I think they kind of understand that this is another tafsir جاء في التحرير والتنوير الريش لباس الزينة الزائد على ما يستر العورة. So it's more than just covering the aura, like you said. The arms and the head thing. So that would be included in that. وهو مستعار من ريش الطير. So this is a borrowing from the rish of a feather, of a bird. So what it means here is adornment. الزينة is adornment. الريش لباس الزينة الزائد على ما يستر العورة. So it's an extra kind of clothing you have there. So I think again, obviously these are general principles. The Quran is generally general. The Quran is generally general, right? And this is the nature of the Quran and the usloob of the Quran. When we read into the sea, so loads of people can take so many things away from that just one thing. So then, like you said, people can take away the hat from there because they see the hat as from min kamalil libas, from the completeness of clothing. And some people, when they don't wear the cap in certain cultures, it's like they haven't dressed to their perfection. And that's similarly in England as well. Like if you went back like 100 years or 200 years, people would be wearing a
But then
cap.
who would actually decide? Who would actually decide about what the urf is, and whose urf decides the rish?
It depends on what context you are in the world and what
Because
time you are in the world.
okay,
There's
so how would we
older.
decide?
So
In the
the
UK?
urf changed in England. The urf changed. The urf isn't in England to wear maybe a beanie, maybe a snapback in certain parts of America. But in England, I don't think the norm
How
is
do you define urf? Are you defining urf by like what the gangsters
what the
do?
people are on, not what the gangsters do, but a general kind of acceptability. So if you were to go to a meeting or a formal meeting, would you be
But what
expected to
about the
wear a hat?
Shah thing though? Shouldn't we
The
look at a
what?
bit like it should be the share? You said the Shah.
Yeah.
So shouldn't the kind of the thing we're doing chaos on be like a king kind of like a official kind of meeting? It should just be the average guy walking around.
I think a formal meeting would be an appropriate measure for this.
So you
Okay,
wear
meeting.
you wear a flat cap to a formal
No,
meeting.
I'm not saying. I'm saying the norm is not to wear any sort of clothing on the head.
Oh, okay,
That's the norm according to my understanding. But interestingly, a granddad. Do you know how we tend to refer to people as uncle and brother and granddad, even though you're not your uncle, your granddad, or your brother, but you tend to do that within Muslims. Well, I started doing that within non-Muslims as well. So this non-Muslim granddad, he told me his life story one day, Bichara. This was about 3 months ago when I was in dermatology. He had a form of skin cancer. May Allah give him a
Why is he
cure.
a bechara?
Because he had skin cancer. That's why. So he was telling me his life story. He lived in Spain,
Okay.
and he had like some problem with the landowner in Spain, and they lived for so long, and that's why he was exposed to sunlight, and he might have got the cancer that predisposed him to cancer. But anyway, he was telling me, I don't know how we got into this topic, but about hats in England, and I think it's because he had a hat with him, and then he was like, in England, hats were generally a measure of how upper class you were in society. So the taller hat you have, the greater status you have in society, and the people with a lower status in society,
Okay.
they
So
would
can
wear
we come on to
a
like
smaller hat.
So right now in the UK, how would we decide? Like, because you can't just say, oh, it depends on the context. Like, if the context is the UK now, let's say your context is Brighton, maybe, or my context is Chelmsford. So based on that context, like, how would we decide then? Because then someone's going to come along and say, well, if we look around, we see everyone, all the good Muslims are wearing jubbas. So that's going to be an argument. So like, what would be a sensible way of gauging it?
So I think the question is to question the ontology of clothing.
Oh,
Clothing ki kya ontology hai? What is the purpose of clothing? What is the philosophy of clothing? Why do we wear clothing? And has our motives for wearing clothing changed?
you've been, you've taken too much inspiration from Mufti Abu Layth, I think, man. MashaAllah. That's good, man.
Does he
Anyway,
use the
sorry,
word
carry on.
ontology? Does
What
he
is
use
the
the word ontology?
what is
I'm not. I only say ontology since I'm like I
Sorry.
use it in most of my presentations.
Nah,
It was
nah, not.
basically came from. Sorry, go on. You lagged out there.
Oh, you're breaking up just a little bit.
Okay,
You're breaking up. Let's just give it
I would say
a few seconds, man.
okay. I think it's fine for me now. I just remembered. So I
Mm,
was speaking to this dude that granddad guy, and he was telling me about the hat thing. And I realized, in Monopoly, the guy has you play
mm.
Monopoly, right? The guy has a really tall hat. This just shows that he's
Yeah.
monopolizing the market and the property market. He's really high class in society. So that was an
Mm.
indication, which I've not read upon it, but obviously I've taken his kind of word from it. That's an
Okay. So
interesting
what is
thing
the
about art.
ontology of clothing? So what is the ontology of clothing, though?
So
Let's
Allah
get to that
describes
question,
for us.
man. So what's the ontology of clothing, and how would we kind of apply it in this country? Because, like, in terms of what a lot of Muslims think, whenever they think of someone Islamic, whether it be someone from Saudi or someone at their local mosque or someone, at the, I don't know, the supermarket, when they think of the Islamic guy, they always have a libas with it, or would you say that's kind of, like, how subjective is that?
I think the ontology of clothing has been defined for us quite clearly in the Quran. As in the three purposes. The first is to cover bits which should be covered, the private parts, the awrah. The second would be a means of adornment and to be fashionable in a sense. And the third would be libasul taqwa as well. Uh, your clothing being a means of keeping you away from something and and being
Okay,
close to God in a way. So
you're
I don't
breaking up a little
basically
bit, Imad.
I don't know why. Guys is
Can the audience just let me know,
is
how's the sound and who's breaking up?
yeah.
If the audience can just
Shamoni's
put it in
here.
the
Assalamu
comments, let me know
alaikum.
what's going on YouTube. 'Cause I can't really.
Yeah, I don't think it's my side because it seems it's fine.
Sorry.
Like white wine vinegar, red wine vinegar is halal. It's not, isn't it? Because all the alcohol may not be removed. How did the discussion go on alcohol? I can't remember talking about alcohol. Oh,
No,
Sahil asked.
that was just a random question by Sahid. But we were talking
Ah,
about clothing and how in this country, like, we have a bit of a problem with how people kind of understand clothing. Does, does that make sense? And
yeah.
I think the internet connection is messing up a little bit, so I'm not sure where this is going to go. But
Shimon said it's fine.
what's
He
the
said
question,
the
Imad?
sound is good. Sound is good. Wassalam, Imad and Habib. Yeah, the sound is good apparently. So yeah, the question was about vinegar. So, are we still on clothing? Habib, you've completely lagged out now. Yeah, Ustad Habib.
Yes, can you hear me?
Add you to the broadcast
Okay, I'm
anytime.
not sure whether Imad.
Okay. Can we just get a confirmation from the audience that my voice is clear and you can see
I
me
don't know
properly?
where it's
Because
gone. Imad's gone now. It's just me here.
no, I'm here. The shake is gone. I don't know. Frozen. Are we talking about Frozen? Disney Frozen. Habib is a bit blurry. Sound is good, but you need a good mic. Habib is
Yeah.
lagging. Frozen. The sheikh is
Assalamu
gone.
alaikum rahmatullah. I'm back. I'm back, people. Imad, are you there?
I'm here. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Sorry, man. Yeah, I moved off my Wi-Fi, man. Anyway, I'm on the normal thing. How is
Yeah.
everyone?
Now
Is
you're
everyone
proper
okay?
clear. Yeah. Now
I
you're
know,
proper
man.
clear.
I just realized it was my fault. I should have just got off the
So
Wi-Fi.
all this time you're blaming me. All
Sorry,
this
man.
time you blame me from even like before we started the broadcast, and it was actually you who was the problem.
Sorry, people. Anyway, I'm back. What were we saying, man? Okay, basically, okay. The point is, Imad, that people are gonna say, like, do you not think people have, like, um uh, already decided that Islamic clothing kind of means a jubba and a hat?
Who's people? It depends. I think.
Like, Muslims in this country.
Okay, I think there's a notion here of having some certain scholars that people kind of follow, and they don't care what they say. Like in terms of they don't really care about the reasoning, and their way is the highway basically. So I think those certain individuals who were like the pioneers of, let's say, Islam or Deobandism or Tabligh or whatever, I think they kind of defined clothing to be like the jubba and the topi.
Mm.
However, this is a question even I asked myself because I don't want to be a hypocrite here because even me, I wouldn't really dare to go to a masjid and lead Jum'ah or Salah without wearing quote unquote Islamic clothing. Right? I wouldn't really do that, right? Because I think the reason this is my own personal reason. I think that it's not because I believe that you need to wear these clothes to pray. It's my belief that the congregation will be satisfied by me wearing these type of clothes, and they need, even if themselves they don't wear it, they don't even wear this type of clothing. But in order to kind of make them more itminan in their prayer, that the sort of solace and this kind of
Yeah.
acceptance of the prayer, this great level of prayer. And I think this is a subtle reason why. I'm not saying it's the right reason, and I don't think like Islamic attire should be defined by what everyone thinks. It should be based on evidence. It should be based on what scholarly individuals can portray as to what Islamic clothing is. Because the question now comes: when you look down on someone for not wearing an Islamic clothing, quote unquote, right? You're sinful. You're being sinful because you're looking down on someone. Even if you don't physically say it, it can be something sometimes you think it, and that's not a good thought to have about a fellow Muslim. So it's again redefining the direction of clothing in terms of what is Islamic clothing. What is Islamic attire? I think it's fine to wear this type of attire. I like it. I think it's elegant. People, I like wearing jubbas because it hides the azim al batan. It's a form of adornment, it's a covering, and I think it's nice to be. Even in Brighton, no one really wears a jumper except for the imams and Ajuma. But I will go sometimes to town. I'll go to restaurants. I'll go to like different places. I've even been bowling and places like that, wearing my jumper, and I think it's elegant. Like I think I like it. I don't really care if people stare at me because they're like, what are you looking at? One of them when you got like loads of because when we go out we have like loads of people around us. So it's just it's not really an issue. I mean the question comes if I'm by
Is that what you
myself,
do when people look at you?
I'll be like, yeah, what
You
you
start on it.
saying? Nah, don't start. I'm a socially good person, man. I'm not a psychopath. I'm
Oh,
socially
alhamdulillah. That was a really good video, man. That was a really interesting video, man. And I think right at the beginning, when he just started off with the mental disorders, what I loved about this video was that
okay, explain the
he,
video, explain what video it is.
so basically, let me just say the point. So he came in,
Okay.
and the point which he made was about how he was reading a book on mental health disorders. Yeah, like what can go wrong with somebody's mind. And then he said that over the years that book's got so much thicker. There's so many more things. So then he thought, let me take a look at which of these I have. So he like kind of thought, do I have any mental health disorders? Um, and I think to have that level of curiosity for yourself is pretty amazing, man. Because like to actually be open to the idea of discovering something which people think is like makes you mentally disabled about yourself and having that curiosity, I think that was really what opened him up to the whole rest of the story, which was amazing. um, but I think being able to kind of bring that analysis there and actually objectively analyze himself, and realize that he's got 12 disorders, and then I'm not sure whether you remember, but throughout the talk he used all of them to his advantage, like as in he used them as a vulnerability to get closer to the audience. Does that make sense, Imad?
Yeah, so I'll just explain to the audience. This is shared knowledge, so you need to tell them. So there's this video I sent to Habib by I think the video was actually delivered by John Ronson, who's the author of a book called The Psychopath Test. The book is called The Psychopath Test. My friend Hamza was reading this book, and then now I was reading it as well. It was a really good book, and then he had like a TED talk based on that book. So he mentioned the things he mentioned in the book in the TED talk, and it was really really interesting. Um, because this guy he goes on a journey. He's a journalist. The first chapter, I don't want to ruin it for the people who haven't read it, but there'll be some spoilers. Disclaimer: just forward ahead by 5 minutes if you don't want the spoilers. But he goes on a journey. He's a journalist, and he gets called by this neurologist outside this Costa Coffee in central London, where it's next to the UCL Department of Neurology. And then this neurologist says, "Oh, I got this kind of book, and it's like a weird book because there's things missing. I don't know who the author is, and it's like a riddle or something." And then they found out that so many other people across the world have got this same book delivered to them, and it just says, "I'll see you soon," and then Peter or something, or some name. Can't remember what the name was. And then they found out that loads of people across the world, some of them were neurologists, some of them were psychologists. There was even an Islamic scholar from Iran who received this book, and they were thinking, "What is this?" And this was what I was a bit confused about because I didn't really realize what the book was talking about after I read the first chapter. Then you see the journey of this guy, John, who tries to discover who is the author of this book. Then it leads him onto the journey about the guy who translated the book, and then that guy's a psychiatrist. And then he goes on a journey of psychiatry, and then basically he challenges
Okay.
the
Oh,
ideas
are
of
you
psychiatry.
so
We
are
can
you
see
saying? Okay, so what part of the story are we on now?
this is where he meets. So this was mentioned in the video actually. This is where he meets a Scientologist.
Oh, okay.
So he meets a Scientologist, and that guy goes completely against like psychiatry. They are out there to get
Okay. So what's the
psychiatrists.
point? What's the point that you're making at the moment?
The point is, I'm just explaining this like the book, the psychopath test, and
Oh,
why he's a
okay, okay,
psychopath. So then he goes to this guy
okay.
and the
So,
Scientologist, and the
but
Scientologist.
who goes to this guy? So who's the guy that goes to this guy?
So he's a journalist. Originally, it was this female neurologist who asks him to investigate this mysterious package he's received, which is this weird book, and it has things missing. And they thought it was a riddle, and I don't know, but it just says "I'll see you soon" at the end. But then they don't
Okay,
know anyone from that part of the world. Basically, it was from I think Sweden or something. So then, so I was on the part where he goes on
okay.
to
I think the
meet the
story is going to be a
Scientologist.
bit long, and we might get a bit confused about the story. So can we just? I think it's best just to
This is
take the
okay.
main
This is okay.
points.
This is the main part. This is the main part. Okay, let me go back to the story. This is the main part. So the
Okay,
Scientologist
but
challenges psychiatry, and tells them about this guy in a prison. So this guy in the prison, he's in the prison. His name's Tony. He's in prison for grievous bodily harm, and he was meant to be sentenced in a prison. However, he convinced them that he's a psychopath, and this is the whole point of the book. He convinced them he's a
okay.
psychopath. He was meant to get 5 years in prison for grievous bodily harm, but he goes to like Broadway's, which is it's a mental asylum for really, really sick psychiatric patients. And then when he goes there, the Scientologist is trying to say he is basically psychiatry is bad because they said this guy's a psychopath, but he's actually not a psychopath. They said he's mentally ill, but he's actually not mentally ill. And this is a story. And this is what this whole book and the whole kind of story challenges the idea of a psychopath. What is a psychopath? And if someone defines a psychopath, like how it basically he was saying how it's easier to convince someone you're crazy than to convince someone you're sane. So this was the point of the book. So this guy Tony, he
But
was
I
in
think
there.
I think one of the really important things is like I think we waste way too much energy trying to stay sane, trying to prove that we're sane. Whereas in reality, by accident, so like, most of the things we do won't make us come across as sane very often, and nor
Okay,
would we want them to.
if you
And
were in a
and
mental
and this was a
asylum,
really big debate. Like, how can we? Because we kind of judge other people, and then we live our lives in fear that other people might judge us, or might say like, "Are you normal or are you not normal?" And that's kind of the question that comes up. And Humaid's arrived, mashallah, and he's
oh
saying that
mashallah,
how do
Humaid
we?
Gori, mashallah.
He's asking how do we define normal? And that's a really important question, because if you know that, based on what you just said about this guy and him realizing, starting with that curiosity, that he was happy to assess himself and he wasn't scared of figuring out that he's got mental illnesses. And then from this point, he like realizes that there's things about him which other people might think aren't normal. And then obviously it goes back to the actual psychopath and him, like, we focus so much on the things which do make the headlines, and we forget and we forget like everything which is normal, everything which is, so like the same as us. It's about wahdatul wujud again. The things which actually remind us of our unity, we forget them.
I think
Anyway, man.
Humaid read the book. Humaid also read the book. I think Hamza was reading the book, and then
Oh,
I saw,
okay.
and then Humaid took the. He said he was reading it next, and I found the PDF. So
Mhm.
Humaid also read the book, by the way. So in this book, it challenges the idea of normal and insanity. So if you were in a mental asylum, Habib, and I put you in a mental asylum, and I said you were crazy, right? Because you've got this personality disorders, right? He was saying how the guy, he was trying to convince them he was crazy. So he went to the prison library and he looked in at the biographies of all these psychopaths and like these textbooks, and he started like trying to copy them. So he looked and he saw there's these people that have gratification by crashing cars. So whenever they crash cars, they have like some gratification. There's certain people, they watch people die and they
Okay,
get
so what is it?
gratification from that.
Okay, so just before we go so deep on psychopaths, what exactly is a psychopath according to you anyway? Like, what does that bring up? Because like I've not really come across that many in my life. I know that there's more down Manchester ends. So what can you describe it, please?
So this is the psychopath test. Now me, this is me diagnosing you if you're a psychopath or not.
Okay, but
So
what if I
let's see.
want to
Let
be
me
a
ask you a few.
psychopath? What if I'm perfectly happy being a psychopath?
So
I might already
I
be.
mean,
I might already have diagnosed myself as a complete psychopath, like 100% of my life.
so that's what in the book he was
Is that? But
challenging
is
that,
that a bad thing?
and he was
Oh,
saying that
okay.
loads of CEOs.
So I've already converted to his idea of the book.
Yes, and loads of CEOs, loads of like heads of companies, they are psychopaths. That's what he mentions, according to the criteria by the guy who wrote the who defined a course on psychopath test, like how he kind of developed that. So psychopath again. I don't know if have you seen Sherlock, or have you probably read Sherlock
Yeah.
Arthur Conan Doyle.
Have you
So
got sister? Take Sister Gulsen's comment a little bit.
major acceptance says it's normalized.
Okay, that's Sister Gulsen's contribution. Jawad Ahmed, Molly Imad, can you share the PDF? PDF? Why don't you buy the book?
It's
I
got
don't
the
know,
psychopath test.
or buy it on Kindle or something.
Okay,
We
I don't want
we
to get
can't
in trouble, but if you
we
want a
can't
book,
we
just
can't
type in the
promote
name of the book,
PDFs.
PDF.
No, man, this is not good, man. If you want to read a book, you should pay the author who wrote the book,
Yeah, that's
and that's
true.
how you'd be blessed with his knowledge. If you're gonna steal his information and then expect it to help your life, then might not, innit? Anyway, especially with Islamic knowledge as well. But anyway, we're not going to share links of illegal books on this
Okay, if you
channel.
want it, just type in the name of the book and PDF, and you
On
should get it.
Amazon, and then you pay like £4 to the poor guy who spent 4 years writing it, so that he's
Yeah, yeah,
actually rewarded for the efforts done.
yeah. Do that. You can get the audiobook as well on YouTube.
Mashallah. Anyway, man. Um,
So psychopath. Yeah. So Sherlock Holmes is a sociopath. Sociopath is a synonym to psychopath. That's what they say. Sociopath is a synonym to psychopath. But the actual definition of a psychopath, according to Google Sharif, is it's not an official diagnosis. So that's the first thing. Obviously, it's a
but no, but
kind of
forget Google, man. I'm asking more like you, because you kind of had this pre. Like, I was happy to be a psychopath, but you were like, psychopaths are kind of this bad thing. So what is it? Like, how do we define it?
okay. Someone who's not receptive to kind of norms. You might have seen in the video he mentioned this bit where he was trying to diagnose the guy as a psychopath, and he was trying to say they're all good things. So there was a segment of the video, and it's also mentioned in
Yeah,
the book where
definitely. Mm.
he was saying that what was he saying? He said, "Oh." But you don't like to harbor people's emotions, like you're not receptive to people's emotions. He goes, that's a good thing. They slow me down. He goes, I'm not slowed down by people. And he said, oh,
Yeah.
you're not receptive if someone's emotional. You can't like, tend to their emotion. He goes, well, it's on them to kind of be strong, and I'm actually helping them by not like giving into that their emotions and hugging and stuff like that and touch. These are like psychopathic traits
Mm.
that you have. So I think in the end, it's drawing a line between a psychopath and a normality is defining normal. Like Humaid said, what is normal? But the question is, if you were in a psychiatric facility and you convince them that you're a psychopath, how do you then convince them you're normal? That's the question I'm asking you. So you're in a mental hospital.
But that is kind of, if we've watched this whole video now, and hopefully people have picked up aspects of the story. Surely the point here is that that is the problem, because once you've been declared insane, then for you to then declare yourself sane is so much more difficult than, like you said, like for the person to pretend to be insane.
Because that's what a sane person would say.
Exactly, and
Yeah,
it
I'm
comes
not
from that idea.
insane.
So, but I think like my lesson from this whole story is to be happy being insane. I don't try and be so normal. Fall in love with the bits of you which like are a bit weird, and don't be all like protective over them.
So are
I
you
think so,
synonymizing insanity with weirdness? So is weirdness insanity?
it depends. Okay, that's a good question. But I would say the slightly less known parts of you.
Okay, and
Weirdness and insanity are quite synonymous, aren't they? Why would they not be synonymous?
okay, there's insanity according to Islamic legal theory. In usul al-fiqh and fiqh, there's insanity. So the
I'm not.
insane person in usul al-fiqh can't bear testimony. They can't, their word is thingy. They're not accountable for things. If they're not sane, if they don't have the sanity in them. This is a person who مرفوع القلم رفع
But then
القلم عن ثلاث.
how would that be? So I think the point you're making, how would you decide that today? Is that why the psychopath test is so relevant in fiqh?
I think so. The psychopath test would be relevant in faith because the person who is insane by Sharia, what psychopath test would you do on them to now say your actions are now accountable? Now your
But
witness, your
why do you
testimony
keep
is
using the word
accountable.
psychopath? Why wouldn't it be like, is
Insanity.
psychopath like you? Okay, so we are synonymizing it to, now you've synonymized psychopathism and insanityism. we, we can't do that with because being so like there's being sane and being insane. No, it's not being sane and being a psychopath.
I would okay, that's true. I would say all psychopaths have elements of insanity within them because it's insane not to be receptive to someone with emotion.
Oh, okay.
Do you understand? So I think obviously it's وهم خصوص من وجه. So
Yeah.
not every insane person is a psychopath, but every
Okay, but there's
psychopath does have insane
so it
qualities within them.
affects your mental health basically.
Yeah. What did
Okay.
Humaid say? What is the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath? I think, according to my research, they're basically the same thing. I think Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes describes himself as a sociopath, a highly functioning
A
sociopath.
high functioning sociopath with your number.
Catch 22. What does catch 22 mean?
Does our sanity depend on others' perception of us? So, and who decides who is insane? That's a really important question. How do we decide? Because then, when you come back to that, I think there's value in our insanity, and there's a sense of gratitude which we should have with that. Um, and
It's
I don't
like,
think like, and I think because obviously, I think nearly in every episode, I kind of have this theme of wanting people just to relax a bit and trust the world a little bit more, be a bit more like kind of grateful. And I think if we can even extend that gratitude towards those parts of ourselves which like we don't exactly boast about, but we still have, and we're kind of grateful for them, and we let go there, we surrender. Then some people might start thinking you're a bit insane.
I think, have you heard of the clone paradox?
We've got
So,
about 5 minutes left.
okay, lots of like science fiction literature, and even like television shows now have played on this idea of you having a clone, so you have an original human being. You have a clone of that original human being, but a clone is someone's cells completely replicated, including their neural cells. So the clone actually is the person. So the clone obviously is a second version of the person, but the clone has the same thoughts and feelings and actually believes that they're the person now. So then who do you believe? Who do you believe? How does the clone convince you that they're the real person? And the real person convinces you that they're the clone. It happens in cartoons and stuff as well, where where you have like this a morphing of a monster into a person, and then you have to decide who's the real one. So how do you decide that? How do I know it's you that's talking, or
But how
and
do
not
you
the
know
clone?
even you? Like, this brings me on to my own like spatial awareness and time awareness. Like, I would say one way to actually figure out your own awareness is to ask yourself, where are you? Like, where are you now?
In space and
And
time.
yeah, so you might be no, just where, as in location, just in space, and figure out where that is. And you might
Like
think
can
like
you say?
you might start describing it by like to the left of this wall, or this wall is on my right. I'm in the room, or on a bed, or on a chair, or something like that. But then like where are you, like actually where's your consciousness? And where's like where's where you think from? And where are you
Mm,
thinking? So where's your thoughts? And then are you your thoughts, or are you like something separate from your thoughts? And we briefly touched on this last week. And then like where you are, and I would say for those of you that are looking for answers, I would say like you're not meant to be looking for answers. The power here is actually in the question. I know we live in a world where we love to have the answer to everything. Yeah. Oh, where am I? Oh, I'm here. I'm on here, and we know the exact answer. But I think actually the power is actually if you can ask yourself and then bring curiosity, like where am I, and then you can actually figure out like where your consciousness is. But for
and
those of you
who am
who
I as
love,
well?
but I think just kind of just letting that question sink in, rather than, because I know a lot of people that have an immediate response. Oh, I want to answer the question. But we've done this a lot in Ramadan. I know that some of you who are here in Ramadan, you'd be aware of this concept of actually just bringing curiosity and then letting the answer come, surrendering almost into the answer, rather than trying to figure out the answer using logical brain. Anyway, man, sorry,
I
man, that was
think
space awareness. A little.
where am I? That's an interesting question. The second question you would ask as well is who am I? There's
I would disagree. I would say I've thought about this quite a lot. So it would actually be when am I as the second question. But anyway, when you go into who am I?
what do you mean? Okay, so who am I? And it brings me on to a Disney film and stuff like that. But what's it
Astaghfirullah,
called?
astaghfirullah. Can we do the Tawbah thing, man?
No,
You have to
it's
do
a
this.
cartoon. You'll be watching it soon with your
Yeah,
little
but
baby,
what's the thing?
man.
Can someone teach me this thing? I don't know how to do it, man. What do you do when you do Tawbah? I swear like some people do this. Oh, you have to spit as
I
well.
think, yeah, basically, I think the idea came from the hadith about when you see a bad dream, you get to your side and you say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitan rajim, you spit to your side 3 times. And I think
Ah.
this is where the idea came from. This is where so it's like you're directing it from this side to
It
that.
was a
So
pretty
you're kind
terrible
of,
interpretation of the idea. I mean, how did you go from that hadith to this action? What's
no, I'm
wrong
just
with you?
linking it. I'm just linking it. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying, I think I'm trying to find a basis for them because I'm not saying it's completely nonsense what people do. You understand? I'm not saying it's the idea. But you'll be watching the film soon as well. Does anyone have an idea what the film is? It's the one where I watched it a long time ago. Habib, you might be watching it soon when your little boy is a bit older. But it's basically so you have like thoughts. It's a very interesting concept. It's basically your inner self, and you have different. Is it called me or
Oh, different versions of yourself.
no? Different parts of you.
Oh,
1 second. It's what's it
you
called?
need to practice it, man, before you explain it. Go and practice it 5 more times, then you can explain it.
I forgot the film. I just remembered it now. But Humaid, Shamon, do you know what I'm talking about?
No,
Maybe
man, no,
Sahil might. Sahil,
Sahih. Anyway, man, so
little Sahil.
that's the where concept. And the second question, and I think like that's your space awareness, and then there's time awareness, which is like knowing when you are. Um,
What do you mean
and
by when you are? What do you mean by
okay,
this?
so for example, I think because the time awareness is where we lose it very often. So a lot of people that when I'm teaching them, I notice that they're very in the past, so they'll be like annoyed or frustrated, or for some reason they might even be happy, but they're kind of like they're in something which has happened before now, and or sometimes people are like in the future, like they're worried about something which is about to happen, and that often happens when you're doing something repeatedly and you're not got anything exciting. Otherwise, they're just scared about the future. But then obviously the question is like, how much can you stop worrying about the past, and how much can you stop worrying about the future and just be here, like speaking to Imad at 2016, just here, like not worried about doing the podcast or how well the podcast is going to go, or just being here, and how much like can I be aware, obviously, of the fact that until now, 1 hour ago, I was like getting ready for the podcast, and 45 minutes ago we started, and now I'm just here in 45 minutes explaining to Imad the time awareness concept.
I was just
And
looking at the
also,
comments. Go on,
yeah,
complete your thing. Sorry,
um,
I stopped you there.
anyway, man. So yeah, so have you got the thing though? So
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
being
yeah.
aware. So what were you doing 15 minutes ago?
I was in this podcast with you speaking
Okay,
about clothes or something,
okay.
or
And then
psychopaths.
like
Clothes or
one hour
something.
ago.
1 hour ago, I think it was eating,
Wow. And now where are we now?
and we are still speaking in this.
Now we're speaking. Alhamdulillah, man. Gentlemen, it's near the end of our time, man.
I,
What were you
we've got the
saying?
on the comments. Someone saying, "Bruh, look at the comments," because we have answers three times, four
Oh,
times
look at
now.
the comments.
Inside out,
Inside out.
inside
Oh,
out. This one
inside
was
out.
called Inside Out. Yeah. So we're in the mind of the kid called Riley, and basically it's about her different emotions that she has, and these emotions are personified into these little beings inside her head. So you have joy, sadness, disgust, and anger. So how are
Serious.
these? Sorry.
But that's the name of like the thoughts.
So the film is called Inside Out, but that's the name of the different emotions that she has, and these emotions is quite interesting because they're personified into these little creatures. So her joy is a creature,
So
sadness is a creature.
she's like living her life,
Yeah.
and then suddenly this creature comes and starts acting.
So to be honest, I've forgotten the complete
Oh,
plot of the
okay.
film, but
Sure.
the
No
idea is,
worries, man.
I think what was interesting from the film was the kind of how these are categorized into these emotions. And
Yeah.
sometimes the joy is suppressed, so the joy hides. And then sometimes, sadness takes over. And then there's this
Mm,
kind of grief, fear, which is always like really an anxious kind of being. So it's about how you think
mm,
about your fear. This is quite interesting because I was listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast,
yeah.
and there was an episode about this guy who does IFS.
Mm,
He's an IFS or something, family therapy. So he's a therapist, and he developed this technique by doing therapy. And he was practicing on Tim, and he was saying, "Okay, think about this time in your life." And he was telling basically the guy, the host Tim, he had this kind of bad thoughts, and he said, "Imagine that bad thoughts are sitting with you at this table, they're sitting next to you. What do you want to say
mm,
to that person? What do you want to say to him? What are you going to do to him? What are your thoughts towards him about why he acts, how
mm,
he acts?" And his acting was to make Tim feel really sad, really depressed, right? And he's saying, "Okay, so get this, and imagine the person is here now. Now speak to them. You tell them, like, why do you make me feel like this?" And
mm.
then, what are you
I,
gonna do?
I think
Where are you
one
gonna
thing
put
which
them?
really helps there is if you can notice that consciousness, like where your consciousness is, you can actually like not have thoughts for a bit and just kind of notice your thoughts. So rather than, like, I think sometimes, especially in the Western world, we are our thoughts. But if you can actually just take that step back and think about who's noticing the thoughts, and just allow the thoughts to come. Like it's not necessarily something you do; the thoughts are just coming. Like, your mind does think automatically, but the thoughts are just there, and you don't be so attached. And then you can notice the emotion. Yeah, like you're saying here, like the emotion which you're really annoyed, But if you actually think about it, all that happened is somebody cut you up. Or what was the example Tim Ferriss gave? Like, what was the actual bad thought? Was it what
I
made him
think
so angry?
it was the depression, and he had loads of bullying and stuff when he was smaller,
Oh,
and
okay, okay.
that made him like really depressed and like have really bad
Mm.
thoughts, and it stopped him from doing things that he could have
Sounds
done.
like subconscious. So subconsciously, he was kind
Yeah,
of affected.
yeah, it was
Oh,
subconscious affected. So it was like a trauma, an emotional trauma, if you like.
and I guess
Um,
at the age that it happened, it was almost impossible for him to realize how, that had affected him in that way.
yeah, and now he's like, he was saying that his life is so great. This guy, he's one of the richest people. Like, he's got like, I would say, is he one of the richest people in the world? I don't know if he is or not, but
Who?
he's got real Tim Ferriss. He's written out like a really successful book for the 4 Hour Work Week, and loads of
I'm getting
entrepreneurs look up
yeah
to him.
yeah I'm getting
But
quite a few recommendations for him now.
so he was saying like my life's so great. Look, he's saying everything about my life is so great. I've got really good friends. I've got really good network. I like what I do and stuff. But there's always this thing in the back of my head like that makes me feel sad sometimes. So then this is what he wanted to bring out, and the reasons for that was because of like trauma in his childhood, which he revealed this in a few podcasts ago. Like he went through some abuse and stuff, and he was like quite a skinny kid, and loads of people used to bully him, and those that had an effect on him. Like he was bullied a lot, and that had an effect on him and
Yeah.
his like choices and stuff like that. Even though he realizes his life's really good, he still has that sadness, and he needed to get that out.
Yeah,
And an
that's what I
example
kind
would
of
be
mean.
an anxious
But that's
person.
what I kind of mean about insanity as well. Like Tim Ferriss, kind of from the work he's done, he's kind of pushed the limits. He's done things which, while he was doing them, he would have probably been scared. People might think that he's insane, like to write the books that he's done, to actually say the things that he says. Sometimes that's kind of my point. Now, when we because of the effect of the bullying or whatever, then that kind of represses somebody, makes them stay within themselves. But if you just realize that, because then that teaches you, if you're bullied, that being weird or standing out is bad. So then as you go older, you kind of don't even show any insanity at all. You just stay repressed. But if you just,
Yeah.
but obviously once you do that, it teaches you. Anyway, I don't know whether that made any sense.
Yeah, I mean it's true. So the
Okay,
IFS.
do you want
Okay,
to just wrap up? Got a few minutes, just like 1 minute.
so okay, based on this last thing, the Inside Out film actually, having your emotion as a person. So having a particular, so if you're anxious and you have loads of anxiety, if you picture your anxiety as like a person, right? And this is not any sort of like Western hipster gimmicky thing because we know in Islam our deeds are presented as people as well. Like when you're in the grave, there's certain hadith about the Quran that you recite will come to you as a person and be your companion in the grave. The durood that you recite to salutations of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they will come to you as like a person in the grave. So this is not like some foreign idea and not taken from like Western things. This is an idea which is central to Islam as well. Well, I wouldn't say central to Islam, but there's some basis for it. So if you're like
I
really
think,
anxious.
yeah, and I think even from the knowledge of the soul, we don't know everything about the soul. Like, I think there's a room to for everyone to experiment. We're not all going to have the same experience. That's from that hadith. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
So yeah, about the soul is something that we don't really have much knowledge about. Allah says in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ويسألونك عن الروح قل الروح من أمر ربي وما أوتيتم من العلم إلا قليلا. That they ask you about the soul. ويسألونك قل الروح من أمر. Tell them that the soul is from the affairs of my Lord, and you've not been given much knowledge about it. You've only been given a little knowledge about it. So, like you said, it's something that we need to develop. We can have theories about it, fine, and anxiousness, bring anxiousness as a person, and imagining your anxiousness as a person and asking your anxiousness the questions
Wow.
like why do you stop me from doing things, what's the reason why. And the way Tim did it, he sympathized with that bit of his emotions, and he understood.
But I
Obviously
think with
it was a
Tim, yeah,
weird one,
I do
but
just want to mention one thing here about
speak
Tim
for
as well.
yourself.
Tim Ferriss has obviously done a lot of personal growth. So I would,
Yeah,
like guess that his self-awareness is very high. And whereas not
yeah,
everyone has that much self-awareness where they can actually notice, because it takes a lot of awareness to be able to notice the emotions. emotional awareness, emotional intelligence, and almost a relaxed state as well. If you can go to alpha or theta or do a bit of brain training, that obviously helps. But I would say with Tim Ferriss, he's got obviously a massive head start in terms of that. And being able to, kind of access altered brainwave states can be really useful, because then you're not scared of the emotion. Fear will come, and you'll just be able to, okay, fear, what are you doing here, bro? And it will tell you, because it's mashallah, emotions are very useful things. Anyway, man, Allah speaks about all our emotions in the Quran as well, man.
Yeah, true. It's we talked about illegal emotions in the past. Certain emotions that people think are not we shouldn't have, but these emotions are what make us human, and I think they should be nurtured in a way that allow us to express our humanity in a sense. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to get angry at certain times, and he was right to be angry. He was angry for the people at certain times. You mentioned the point about brainwaves and accessing those areas of the brain. This guy Richard Schwartz, who Tim Ferriss interviewed, and
But
he
we
was
got
talking
like 10
about this.
seconds left, Imad, yeah?
10 seconds. Come on, you always say that, man.
Come
You'll
on, man.
allow me to at least finish my point. So the guy Richard Schwartz, who developed the IFS, the therapy model, he was saying he's talking about without using psychedelics, getting to that high level of brain, and this is what you were speaking about,
Well, you can use,
experiencing those
yeah.
waves
Well, you can use the
without
Quran.
using psychedelics. So is
You
the
can connect
Quran
to
an
Allah.
emotional psych?
Of course,
Again, it
it
comes
affects your
down.
being. It
Yeah,
affects your
it
being.
depends on the ontology of psychedelics. So that's something for future discussion,
It
inshallah.
depends how deep you go on the Quran, or how deep you go into
Yeah,
your prayer, or how deep you go into your spirit.
the Quran is for reflection. The Quran is for shifa. Allah says
It's
it's
for a
for shifa,
spiritual high.
for
It's for
tibba,
a spirit.
tadabbur.
It's for a spiritual high.
It is in a way. It is in a way. It's to connect you. It's sort of to recalibrate you, I suppose. And having a daily. This is we always talk about Quran, reciting the
Hello,
Quran,
man.
and
Okay, Jazakallah. We're not going into Quran now. Jazakallah khair, everyone.
yeah, you cut
Assalamu
me off.
alaikum wa rahmatullah. Yes, man. Say assalamu alaikum. You got 10 seconds, man. 3
Okay,
seconds.
and let me just finish the quote of the Quran. I think 1 minute. So the Quran, obviously, it's sent down as something to reflect on. But I think the final point I'd just like to mention, we always talk about the Quran being so good, but even if we don't understand it, try obviously understand it, but have a small portion that we read like every day of the Quran. I think this is advice to myself. I started doing it again, even though I've memorized the Quran. Right? There's been long periods of time where I don't read the Quran, unfortunately, because you get busy. But a busy life, when you have a busy life, you have to make time for things. And I think
MashaAllah.
making
Jazakallah khair.
time
We
to read
all
the
have to
Quran is
make
something
time
very
for the
important.
Quran. And I think, like, if you're spending time with Quran, you should be up leveling in terms of your relationship with the Quran.
Join
Not
Habib's
just,
class on the Quran. Join Habib's
oh, yeah,
class
you can join
on.
my Quran classes, man. My Quran classes are paying.
So do you recite the Quran? So do you allow people to recite, or how does the class
Yeah,
work?
it's basically, a lot of it's one-to-one coaching. So you come along, you put
Okay.
in, and then you just read with me. Or I'll read if nobody wants to read, then I can read. But it's obviously the aim is just to reconnect with the Quran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah. Jazakallah, Imad, man.
Okay, inshallah.